Voices from the Vault is brought to you by the Shelter Island Historical Society. Today's story was researched, written, and read for you by Martha Pichet.
Shelter Island is hardly known for whaling. For oysters and menhaden, yes. But whales and whale oil? Yes! The island has a proud history of whaling captains who helmed ships from nearby ports. The industry was at its height from the 1840s through the 1870s, and New Bedford, Massachusetts was its undisputed capital. But hundreds of ships sailed from other ports along the East Coast and brought in large amounts of whale oil and baleen for ship owners. The records aren't complete, but as many as 25 men from Shelter Island captained whale ships out of Greenport and Sag Harbor. 5 were from the Cartwright family: Benjamin, Erastus, Frederick, Maltby, and Sylvester. 4 from the Griffing family: Absalom, Charles, Maxwell, and Sylvester. From the Havens family: Jacob, Joseph, Monroe, and Stratton. And as many as 5 from the Case family: Samuel, Jeremiah, Isaac, Joseph, and Nathaniel. Headstones for 8 captains are scattered throughout the Presbyterian cemetery. Maltby Cartwright's headstone is the highest. Was he trying to make sure we wouldn't forget his accomplishments? In April of 1836, whaling ship Henry returned with 2,500 barrels of oil. Cartwright's intention was to go whaling for 3 years, but he was back in just 9 months, with no room on board for another barrel filled with oil. But sailing in past Montauk, whalers sighted 2 more right whales. Harpooned and lashed to the side of the ship, the massive pieces of cut blubber were boiled down for oil back on the dock in Greenport. The Henry was loaded with 12,000 pounds of baleen, too, or whalebone, the plastic of the 1800s, used for everything from women's corsets to typewriter springs. If the Guinness Book of World Records existed in the 1800s, Maltby Cartwright's entry would be for most whale oil taken in shortest span of time. On a longer voyage 6 years later, he returned with nearly 4,000 barrels of oil. He retired to a home at South Ferry and died in 1879. His widow Hannah later sold the 42-acre homestead to Francis Marion Smith, the Borax King, for $8,000. Some captains were not so keen as the famous Cartwright. Henry Reeves captained the Thames in the early 1840s, and his journal reads, "Experienced the most unpleasant weather that I ever have, which makes me sicker than ever of the life of a sailor, all for the love of money." Other captains weren't nearly as lucky as Maltby Cartwright either, Charles Claremont Griffing especially. But he certainly persisted. He was the first whaling captain to leave Greenport aboard the Potosi in 1828. On his second voyage with the same ship in 1830, it was destroyed upon the rocks east of Cape Horn near the Falkland Islands. Luck was with Captain Griffing then. He and all of his men were saved. In a letter dated 1840 to his brother, Moses Dyer Griffing, he writes, "Yesterday we were fired upon and boarded by a brig which we supposed to be a pirate. They came on board 9 in number, each one armed with a long knife, but showed no other arms. They wanted a spar, but finding none to suit them, they retired, taking nothing from us except part of our vegetables. Very lucky we were that our boats were no larger. I cannot positively say they were real pirates. Another thing against them is that they never showed any colors. We have several times seen ships of war of different nations, but they always showed their colors on firing a gun." 3 years later, another letter arrived, this time addressed to Captain Griffing's wife, Maria Havens, from the United States Consul in Rio de Janeiro. "It becomes my most mournful duty to inform you of the death of your husband, of the bark Sarah and Esther. Captain Griffing died of inveterate dysentery, the disease aggravated by the anxiety he underwent in consequence of his seizure and long detention here." Now, the anxiety he underwent refers to unscrupulous authorities accusing him of having smuggled on board his vessel a large quantity of coffee. They never found a single bean, but forced him to remain in port for months, convinced they would find contraband aboard the Sarah and Esther. They never did. Other Shelter Island captains were taken by the sea. Conklin Glover killed by an enraged sperm whale. Captain Stratton Havens struck by lightning on Lookout. Jacob Havens' skull was fractured by a whale's fluke, though a surgeon in Rio de Janeiro managed to save his life. And regrettably, Captain Isaac M. Case was found guilty and censured twice in Greenport for a far more serious charge than coffee beans on board. As captain of the Augusta, he was no whaling captain, but at the helm of a ship only masquerading as one. The Augusta was in fact transporting slaves, and not for the first time. The U.S. government finally caught up with him in September 1861. The slave bark Augusta was condemned, and its owner, Appleton Oaksmith, jailed in Suffolk County in 1862, though he escaped. I can't find records for what happened to Isaac M. Case. Most of Shelter Island's whaling captains made it safely back home, though it appears that Elias Jennings traded this island for another. He grew tired of whaling, grew tired of mining for gold, too, and lived with a large family in the South Seas. And had conventions been drastically different, Maria Cartwright might have become a captain too. She was Maltby's sister, and she married Smith Baldwin of Babylon. She spent 2 years at sea with him, where she gave birth to their first child. She was an able navigator aboard the Roanoke in 1847. They raised 4 children back on dry land, though only one made it to adulthood. Maria and Baldwin bought the windmill that now stands in the field at Sylvester Manor. No more whales to hunt, no more barrels of oil to fill. So much safer to mill grain for Shelter Islanders instead. Their beautiful headstones, anchors carved for both husband and wife, are sheltered beside the north face of the Presbyterian Church. I still have so many questions, and there's still so much to learn. But know this: Shelter Island's whaling captains brave the seas and risk their lives to earn a hard living very far from home. It's not hard to imagine how often they must have dreamed of being safe at home on Shelter Island. Thank you for listening to me, Martha Pichet. I'm a playwright with a home in the Heights, and I'm now working on a play called I Am a Ship. It's story, song, and memoir, steeped in the stories of women who went to sea with their whaling captain husbands.